Hi there, it's Mark with episode 2 of Mastering Masks in Adobe Lightroom. Last week we got started with looking at how we download the images that accompany each and every episode and how to get them into Lightroom to play along. We also looked how we could use them in Adobe Camera Raw if that is your particular poison. We also noticed that Adobe Camera Raw and Lightroom Classic are indeed the same beast. They just wear different clothing. So everything you see in me doing the various masks and edits here in Adobe Lightroom Classic, which is my particular poison, you can do in Adobe Camera Raw. Today we're taking things a little bit further, but we're still basics. We'll start getting a little bit more advanced next week. I just need to make sure we have covered off all the bases. Today we are going to run through every mask. So there's the list in the middle of the screen. We will go down. We won't do them with a massive amount of detail, but just enough so we know the general concepts behind each and every mask. We have, as usual, a series of pictures to help us get there, and these are they. A variety of pictures to take us through today's lesson. Those pictures, as is usual, are in a zip file on my website, and the link to that is down below in the notes. If that's alien to you, go and watch last week's first and then come back and join us here. One thing I think I should have pointed out is I am on Lightroom Classic 2026 doing this. So if you're watching this next year, there'll be a different version. There may well be changes to masks. Something to bear in mind that Adobe do improve and generate new versions of the algorithms and the code, and indeed new masks altogether. So if you see me do a select subject and it selects a particular part and it doesn't select that same part for you, it could be on a slightly different version. It could be that your configuration is set up a little bit different because of that. So not to worry, because we cover adding and subtracting, we can always fix that as we go forward. The other thing before we get into it, and this is breaking my rule of starting basic and going forward, was last week I said how masks aren't always efficient, and I used this as an example. So if I D for my develop module here and I choose select sky and zoom in, Control plus, we saw how the mask of the sky was bleeding into the towers. And I said I would show you over time a way of fixing that. It can happen. Well, because I've had a number of questions, I'm going to show you that now. Even though it's not a basic technique, it is just a bit of a hack. We've selected sky. We can see how it's inefficient. We can subtract from that sky selection a sky selection. Bear with me. Subtract sky, and now we're left with, can you see the I'll increase the opacity of my mask. You can see now all that's left is the bleed, and which is the stuff we don't want. We don't want that, the selection. So now we invert that and we're left with the sky without the bleed. I'll do that once more because it is a little bit more of a detailed technique, which I was going to save, but because I got questions, there we go. So we did a select sky. The same thing can happen with objects, by the way, subjects. So we select sky and we think, oh, that's no good. Look at all that bleed. So before we do anything else, we subtract sky. And then with the resulting thing on that subtraction, we invert. And now we get a much tidier selection of the sky. So there you go. It's worth popping questions over to me. Let's move on. I'm going to play the titles. We're going to roll our sleeves up and we're going to get cracking on episode 2. See you very shortly. I'm currently editing this episode, so I thought I would jump back in to update you on something. This video is about 30 minutes long. That is long by some standards on YouTube, but this is specifically a long form video. We can't expect to get through subject, sky, background, people, landscape, objects, brush, linear gradient, radial gradient, color range, luminosity, and so on, big breath, in one video, unless it is longer form. So please stick with this. These are designed in compartmental parts. These are designed such that when we move from picture to picture, you can just press pause, go and have a cup of tea, come and pick it up later on, the next day, the next minute, whatever. It wouldn't work if I did individual bite-sized videos for each and have a flow of continuity between them, because we do work back and forward to greater and lesser degrees on pictures, returning to improve on a selection that we did earlier on. Later on, we might think, let's go back and try that. And that's kind of the theme for this particular course. So not all my videos are long form, these are long form. And I've just made it much longer by adding this. Enjoy. Okay, now that he has disappeared from the top left of the screen, we've got more pixels to play with. Hurrah! So there's a bonus right away. 2 for the price of 1. We're going to be running down all of the masks. Well, not quite all of the masks. If I pop over to my develop module and just click on masks and we come down to ranges, there is another one, depth range. We will not be using depth range. It's a little bit more, shall we say, specialist, or rather there are a lot less photos out there that contain depth range information for us to play with. So we won't be doing that. Perhaps it's one for a different video, but I'm sticking with the majority use here and we will cover all of them. Perhaps not subject, sky and background so much, because we have already covered that off. And with that, just a reminder about what today's lesson is about. It's not about getting to the detail of all of these tools. It's about making sure we cover at least all of these tools and we know roughly how they work. We will build our skills on that starting next week. That said, there are some tips in here which aren't necessarily basic, as we demonstrated in the introduction. So without further ado, G for a gallery view. Here are our pictures. Now clearly that's underexposed, that one's a little bit underexposed, and so on, and this one's overexposed. So the first thing I'm going to do is just slap an auto edit on them just to give them a bit of life. So if I hold down the first one, shift and hold down the last one, I have them all selected. I'm in my gallery view. I'll press tab to bring my sidebars back and minus sign to make them smaller. So while I'm in my gallery view, you can see, and they're all selected, you can see I've got some quick develop controls up here. So I'm just going to click auto there, and that will apply them auto to all of these pictures. As you can see, it's a good starting point, and you don't have to go into develop mode to get auto across all of your pictures. All right, let's jump into this one first. Now, oh, that's a bit bright. Thank you very much, auto. I'll take that down. Okay, now here's a question for you. What is the subject here? So if I go up to our masks and I chose select subject, what do you think it will select? I'm not going to show you. I'm going to leave you to have a think about it, and we will come back to this particular picture. Let me know in comments if you know what it will select. I've got my own idea, and by the way, I've not tried this, so my idea may be wrong, and I'll tell you my idea before we actually click on it. So let's go to our very next picture, which is the Tyne Bridge over the glorious River Tyne. Now, it's quite busy. A lot of things here. I'm not so worried about what the end result of the edits are today. That is personal, really. You might edit this a different way to me, but we might both want to edit the bridge. So today is more about going through all these masks and learning how to use them, not necessarily to then complete the edit, albeit we will be doing some of that. So how would we go about doing the Tyne Bridge? So I think the first thing we should look at is really subject. What do you think subject will make of this? Let's click on it. detect the subject. Now, that's bad. It's really bad. Not only is it not selected the whole bridge, it's only selected the arch. And within the arch, look, it's solid. Let's just bump the exposure up to max. Look, each and every girder has not been selected. You've gone straight through. It's assumed all the sky is part of that structure. So that's not good. So subject's a no-no. Control Z to get rid of that. So sky, obviously not. So the next one we have is landscape. What is landscape about? Landscape will analyze a picture and will try and identify parts such as river, sky, foliage, artificial ground, architecture, and so on. The resulting list you get will vary according to what analysis it has done of the picture. Now, let's just run down them. So sky, that looks a reasonable selection of sky, albeit I can see bleed on the top of the towers and in the girders. Architecture, that's possibly a good place to start. That's quite a comprehensive mask of the Tyne Bridge itself. Vegetation, clearly not, but there were some trees down the left hand side. Water, no, albeit look, it's managed to put some water underneath the Tyne Bridge floating in the sky. And artificial ground, yes, that indeed is the pavement. So let's go with architecture and create the mask. Now clearly it's far more than we want, so we'd want to subtract from this. Our good old subtraction tool we've used so far is a brush. So let's stick with that just for the moment. We'll get better at subtraction tools and options as we progress through the series. So with my float and density at full and brush size a little bit bigger, very little feather, I'm just going to quickly, and auto mask off so that it doesn't try to stay within the shape. I'm just going to come up here, tip, I'm going to click, move my cursor, hold down my shift and click again, and it will give me a straight line running through there. And quite quickly, really, we are able to get a reasonable mask on the bridge. Another thing to say about the pictures that we're actually using today, I will be utilizing pictures for more than one sort of selection. I'll just be coming back and forward between them, just using them as targets, if you like. Now we could continue this and just, tidy up extra bits that it's done, like the masts that have come through, but I'm not going to bother that much. That is a good selection. So now we might want to just, increase the exposure just a little bit, lift the shadows perhaps, and start to get a little bit of that blue popping, but not a lot, but just enough to put a bit of colour back in there. So there you go. That was one good way of selecting the bridge. And let's do the horrible exposure trick again. If I throw it all the way up, you can see there is bleed, but it isn't as bad as the bleed that was there before. And incidentally, we can vastly improve and get rid of that bleed using other tools, which we will come to later on in this particular episode. How else could we have done this? Right, well, let's delete mask 1. And we've got objects. I'll be coming back to objects a few times. So object selection allows you to paint or draw a rectangle. Let's do the rectangle first. So let's click there and draw this rectangle and tell Lightroom that our object is in there. What does it do? That is a very, very good selection from the right going across, but it falls down here. We could actually just add with a good old brush again and just continue that selection. Notice how it's spilled out there. That's because we left, let's do that again, add with a brush, because we left auto mask off. If we put auto mask back on, bring the size down a little bit, and if we now paint, it should stay reasonably in the line on the underside of that bridge. And down in here, it probably won't do as good a job, but that's not too bad. We're still able to lift that exposure up a little bit and bring the shadows up a little bit, get that blue starting to come back in. G for a gallery view. What's the next thing? Okay, let's develop this particular picture. I'm actually going to reset this picture because I didn't like what auto did, and I'm just going to bring it up slightly with exposure. This is a person. This person happens to be Venus, a friend of mine and a model, who we shot in Exhibition Park in Newcastle. Notice how Lightroom, without being prompted, says there's people in here. Now if there's more than one person, it will find more than one person. It should give us a little icon for every single face, in which case there's only the one, and that's Venus. Clicking on the person, we get the entire person selected, and there's the mask. But we've got individual component parts, so let's pick a few out. We'll go face and body skin, we'll go iris, and we'll go hair, and we'll go clothes. I've got 5 separate masks there. It says here create 5 separate masks. It's important that you check this box, whether it says 5, 4, 3 or whatever. Otherwise you just get a mask made of those parts. So create mask. It now labels them for you. So this is person 1 clothes. You'd also have person 2 clothes, and so on. With clothes, I like to bump up the clarity, which you find under effects. It both lightens and brings out the texture in clothing. It adds a lot of good highlights. We might see it again later on. So if I just bump that up a little bit, immediately her jumper has got more substance to it. I'll move on. Hair. Now, hair can be very hit and miss depending on the colour of the hair, the colour of the background, what you blend it to, how frizzy it is, and so on and so forth. I've got a video on my channel where we actually look at doing multicolours within hair and changing hair colour, so I'm not going to go into that now. All I'll say here is you can go way over the top. Now that is getting it way over the top. Why? Because the colour here is brown. I'll exaggerate it a bit more, as opposed to black, and that's all to do with the ambient light and the thickness. Obviously Venus's hair is very thick here. We're looking through quite a lot of hair, and here where there's less hair behind it, we're getting more light through, and because of the particular lighting conditions we had, that's not good. So if I want to add a little bit of sheen to the hair, I'll probably go with highlight or whites, probably a little bit of both, and that's how I would add a bit of sheen to the hair. So just very subtly before and after, probably a little bit too much. Next mask is the irises. So let's zoom in here. That looks a bit freaky. So with irises, what I like to do is make them look freaky. I deliberately overexpose them in order that I better see the result of adding clarity. So here I'm temporarily doing something to aid my visibility of a change. So now with the clarity, I can better see what that's doing to the irises, and I'm going to leave the clarity about there, and then I return that visual aid to where it was, knowing that I've set a good point of clarity. And now I will brighten up slightly, just to put a little bit of colour in that eye. Now in this particular instance, because of where the light was, her right eye is brighter than her left. So what can we do about that? Well, let's create a mask, shall we? Let's create a brush. Let's take all the feather away. Let's put the size roughly the size of her eye, and just paint in there. And now with that separate brush, I can separately increase the exposure in that eye, just to bring it up slightly to match the other one, possibly a bit strong. And moving on, where were we? We've got as far as the eye. Next one was body skin. Let's zoom back out again. Z takes you back to full screen to fit the screen. If I had had more time on the shoot, I would have had probably a reflector to bounce some light under her chin. I don't have the luxury of that now, but what I can do with the body skin is I can introduce a bit of exposure underneath to lift that up, and that gives a little bit of contrast showing more shadow of the chin, more definition there, but also complements the lightness we put on her jumper. Facial skin. Now with facial skin, I leave this to the models I photograph. I ask them how much touching up, if any, would they like to do on this. Are there any other things they'd like to do? And is there something they might want to change, such as colour of their dress or whatever? I do ask a few questions because invariably I'm doing these pictures for them. And texture is quite common to be requested, but not as far left as that where it becomes far too much airbrushed. So dilute the taste, and I find, I was going to say I find about there's good, but there would be different in every single picture. Looking at the picture, I think about there is fine. Okay, I will leave it there for now. We might revisit Venus and put a backlight in later on. So we've done subject, sky and background in previous videos, and we're toying with it again in this one. We've done people, we've done landscape to see the individual objects. We've done objects, but only as a rectangle. Let's jump over. I'm jumping out of sequence here, but let's jump over this picture of Ella. D for a develop module. And let's go and choose objects again. And yes, I can use the rectangle, but I just want to show you how clever the paintbrush is here, the selection brush, or selection brush. I call it the scribble. I'm just going to scribble on Ella. So I'm just going to do that. Now, do you think, before I take my finger off my mouse, do you think that is an accurate mask? No, neither do I. What does Adobe think of it? Wow. I mean, wow. Individual hairs. The lock of hair she's got falling down behind her shoulder. All from that really rough scribble. So where you've got a reasonably enough defined object, that scribble tool is absolutely wondrous. Gone are the days where you'd have to be so precise in getting everything when you can just go ugh, and scribble across it, which is more or less what we did, and I promise not to make that noise again. Anyway, now we've got Ella all highlighted. What I wanted to show again is the effectiveness of clarity. So as I bump clarity up, if you look at her outfit and see how it gets the highlights lifting up and gets more definition in it, which is really good. However, what it's also done is added a bit of a change to some of the colour and textures in her face and hands. So I want to remove those. So again, subtract, we'll use our brush, feather it ever so slightly, and we will just come in here on the face, on the hands, and I don't need to do legs because we've got tights on there. So there you go. And yet this was a person, so let's see what it does with a person as well. So select people, and there's the component parts, of which I could have chose clothes. That could have been another way of doing it, but for what I wanted to do, that scribble and then a quick subtraction was fine. But again, here we can actually go the entire person. But what's missing from here, if you notice, there's no eyes, there's no iris, there's no whites of the eyes, because it's recognized we can't see them, so it's not going to give you the mask. So these masks are dynamic. The same with the landscape mask. Okay, let's cancel that. G for a gallery view, and let's get back on track. D for a develop module. In here we've got a picture of Seaton Sluice when the tide was out, and I want to put some sort of brightness across these boats. That's what I want to do. So when I look to edit a picture, I may have said this before, I say to myself, do I need to edit it at all? Do I want to edit it at all? Is there something I must do, such as a bit of litter that I want to remove, or something that's a bit overexposed or underexposed? Is it something I want to do creatively. I might want to make it black and white. I might want to do a selective color. I might want to change the color. I might want to be creative in that regard. So in this case, I actually want to lighten that, but I don't just want to pop the subject. Let's have a look at subject, shall we? Select subject. As would expect, it is the boats, and popping those, and I'm going to exaggerate this, is not quite what I want to do, because I think it's too artificial with them against the harbour walls, even though I'm exaggerating it. Incidentally, I tend to exaggerate things so I can get a better visual idea of where the mask is actually working. So no, I don't actually want to select subject, so let's just delete that mask. What I'm going to do instead is put a radial gradient on. Now radial gradients, you click and drag and it forms the shape. Drag it down, left, right, you see it works. If you wanted to have a circle, if you hold down your shift key while you drag, it is a circle. Take your shift key off and you're back to being able to actually change this however you want. And I don't care where I put it initially. I'm not precious about getting it right first time, because I'll always recenter if I need to. And I'm going to put that there. Now I'm going to put an exposure lift on it because I want to demonstrate the effectiveness of feathers. That is clearly not very good, but as I feather this more, your eye doesn't realize that has been lit, and the effect I've got here is of lighting the boats but also not confining it. It's more like there is a natural light there, not just lighting the boats, there is a light, a general light there. However, if that was the case, let's say behind this rock there was some light coming in, it wouldn't hit the side of the rock, so I want to subtract from there. So we can subtract, and this time I'm going to use a linear gradient to subtract off my overlay layer, and if I hold click there and I drag to the right, I've got a very quick and effective way of doing that subtraction. And there's my mask. What else would I do with this picture, incidentally, is having brightened that, I think I do want to decrease the brightness of the surrounding area. So let's do another radial gradient, roughly in the middle, don't care. And this time, and you can do this with all masks, click invert and get that feather up, and just take the exposure down just a little bit, and that has made that pop. So if we want to look at before and after, our backslash key is a friend, before and after. Okay, while we're on this picture, let's stick with the subject of linear gradients, and let's click here and drag up, and you can see where the feather is or where it's really tight. Also, as I'm wobbling my mouse, it's not straight. It doesn't have to be straight, but if I do hold my shift key, it becomes straight, and if I move to the right, it becomes straight that way. So that is how you control the area that's going to be affected, and then the roll off. So let's say we wanted to darken the bottom of this picture and slightly roll off. As we came up, we would do that. We'll do linear gradients on the next picture as well. So what have we done? Well, we have done subject, sky, background, people, landscape, objects, brushes. We've got colour and luminance to go, but let's now go back to that question I posed you. G for a gallery view, D for develop. What is the subject in this picture? My guess, I would say definitely the foliage, but I would think that because that red is so stand out and different, it might even target that red. What did you think? Let's find out. Whoa, wow. Well, I didn't expect the subject would be the bushes on the left and the arch of the Tyne Bridge. I can't justify that. But I do want to do something with the foliage. So what am I going to do? Let's delete that mask, Control Z. Let's try landscape. I'm conscious this video is getting quite long, so let's nudge it on a little bit more. So it's found sky, architecture and vegetation. Vegetation seems quite okay. So let's create a mask. But let's do the exposure trick again. Look at how bad that mask actually is for bleeding between the individual fronds and twigs and such. So how can we improve that? Let's put an overlay back on again. Well, we could subtract all the light areas. Okay, subtract a luminance range. Luminance is brightness. And let's click in that cloud. And already you can see how the individual fronds are more defined and there's more light coming through. And this is where we selected. I'll explain more about this on the next picture, but I can actually make that a bit wider in my selection of luminosity and therefore make them even more defined with the sky coming through where it needs to be. And from there I can then lower that if indeed I wanted to do that, and increase the saturation and a bit of clarity, whatever it was I wanted to actually do on the foliage without it creeping in the sky. That's a really good mask now over there. The default wasn't. Over the coming weeks we're going to be doing more with the combination of masks is far more powerful than individuals. Alright, I promised you one more. G for a gallery view, that must be this one. D for a develop module. Colour range. Okay, I kind of like this picture. I want it a little bit more straight, so let's immediately crop it. Use our spirit level, and I'm going to click on the underside of the gutter there and the underside of the gutter there, and I'm going to bring a little bit of this into there to make it a rule of thirds picture. Okay, let's say we want to target this particular colour on the light. Well, we've got a mask for that. Under range, called colour, and let's just click on a colour. Now, whenever you click on a colour and whenever you click on luminosity, two things. You will think, oh, that is far more than I wanted, and that is because they don't apply a range. They've already got a healthy range on them. Here is our range up here, and incidentally that little dot gives us an idea of the colour that was picked. So when you see more than one colour range in your lists here, you can tell which one refers to which colour by the colour of the dot on it. Let's refine this by bringing it down or broaden it. Obviously we want to refine it. So that looks to me like a much better representation of that colour. But it's missed this bit out here. So why can't we add another colour range? There's nothing to stop us and clicking in there. And that's better. Okay, I think that is a better selection of the colour. But that colour's on people. I don't want it on the people. So why don't we subtract with a brush, auto masks on, brush a little bit smaller, and let's remove our mask from this chap here, and let's remove a mask from these people, albeit it's true that they have those colour on them because it's reflected light, but I'm just playing with masks. And now we can change the colour there using, for example, the hue slider. So we can actually start to change the colour of the lights that we have going on there. Let's address this with luminosity. So I'm now going to switch the colour mask off, not delete it, because I can always come back and add to it. So that's now switched off. I'm going to try a luminosity range. And again, I'm probably going to click a bright part of this subject, so somewhere about there. And again, that's an awful lot, but here we've got the range. So I'm just going to slide this up for a second. I'll explain that in a minute. But if I move this range now back and forward, That is selecting the darkest parts of the picture. That is selecting the lightest parts of the picture. The lugs on either side are the range of the luminosity that is selected. And these lugs are how much feather there is. So you can feather it into the bright and feather it into the dark. Sometimes when I choose luminosity, I'll just delete that. Sometimes when I choose luminosity, I just do a rough stab. So there, knowing that I'm going to be impacting this. I can now do all my controls from here. I can narrow the target range. I can take the feathering back. And that is a good selection. It's still on the people, but we've seen how we removed that in the previous one. I'm not going to bother removing that again, but now I've got my luminosity, I can actually do a similar thing. I can start to look at change the colour. So there you have it. G for a gallery view. We have gone through subject sky background last week and a little bit this week. We've looked at people, how it shows component parts. We've looked at landscape, how it shows component parts. We've looked at select object using a bit of a scribble and using a box. We've looked at the brush again. We've done several refinements with adding and such. We've introduced linear gradients, radial gradients, colour ranges and luminosity ranges. If that hasn't stuck, perhaps rewind and play the component parts again. Let me know how you get on, and I'll be interested to know what you thought the subject was on that as well. Next week, with the pictures we have, we will start to look at more precision and actually using the masks to continue on into the edit. Today I wasn't so worried about the actual edit so much as defining the targets, getting those masks to touch what we wanted to then edit. As usual, I'm now going to tell you to click on the subscribe if you haven't. Thank you very much. Click on the bell to be notified of future episodes as they pop. Thank you. And of course, give it a thumbs up. See you next time. Bye for now.